Brilliant. So I'm just going to give a very brief introduction, actually, just on some of the background to give a bit of context to this project. Really, the bulk of the work on this has been done by Yuri and other co-authors. So just to start us off, though, just another brown envelope from the OPC correspondence collection, although you'll notice that this one has a significant omission to it, in that whilst we do have lots of correspondence from OPC, there are two main areas missing. One is the Central American collection for the BCA publications, and the other is the Yarkand collection, which is part of the reason this project has been so hard, and we'll talk about some of this, and I know that Yuri will also cover it as well. The material in the collection itself is very poorly labelled. It's been extremely difficult to work with, but it's a very important early collection, which is why we're here to talk about it today. I find it very exciting as a research project, and I've been doing some of the background work on the actual expedition itself, and attempting to untangle a little bit of the sort of colonialistic nature of the expedition, actually. So we are talking about three actually expeditions in total. The material that we've been working on is from the final expedition. The very first one that went out was in 1868, which was by two merchants who were essentially racing to get to an area of the world that wasn't yet in contact, so that they could establish trade relationships. The first government-sanctioned expedition went out in 1870, and that essentially failed because the person they went to meet wasn't there when they got there. But thankfully, on the second expedition, again, government-sanctioned, which was sent out in 1873, they did manage to meet up with Yaqub Beg, who is the Amir or ruler of this area of world, and I'll show you a map in a moment just so you can kind of position yourself globally. This final expedition was huge in scale, and used hundreds of people and animals as bearers, and this kind of thing. It's estimated that it had a sort of 5-year impact on the economy of the local area. So it was really important on many different levels, not just from a naturalist point of view. But we're really going to concentrate on the spiders going forwards. So here we go. There's the other two things. Should have clicked the button earlier. Here's the map, just so you can locate yourself a little bit. The route itself crossed a number of different countries. As you can see, I've put on the main markers for the sites that they visited. They started out in the south near Lahore, went up to Leh. They visited Yarkand and actually met up with the ruler in Kashgar, right up in the north. The white mountain range that you can see are the Karakoram Mountains. The green mountains that I've marked on, that's actually K2, which is, as you will all know, the second largest mountain in the world. It's also one of the most dangerous, and this was with an area of the world where they essentially walked across or rode on the back of a pony. It would have been an extremely difficult expedition, and they did it in forced marches where they were doing between 10, maybe 20 miles a day. And along that route, they had a naturalist collecting specimens. There was a map that was produced, here it is, as part of this expedition, with all the various routes coloured onto it. It's not terribly easy to see in this format, and I'm afraid there's no really good digital version of this map that exists, although they have become available over the last few years. There's no really sort of high quality one that you can zoom in on. It is an extensive map of the area, and it's one of the first that was ever produced, and it was part of the reason for going on the expedition, was to do the mapping, actually. This one's been coloured in, so you can see a bit better. Thank you to Yuri to show all the different routes that were taken. The party travelled largely in two halves. Our naturalist was in the first half of the party, but they sent out satellite groups because they were really interested in getting as much information as possible about everything they could whilst on this expedition, although it was ostensibly to set up trade relations in this northern area, this Yarkand area. They were looking for lots more information than that, and doing this geological survey. They were looking for things like coal and jade and exportable wealth. So the naturalist that went on this journey was Ferdinand Stlin. You can see him highlighted on the left there with a big pink arrow over his head. He joined the Geological Survey of India, and he was briefly the joint curator of the Indian Museum as well. He was a paleontologist and geologist by training, but had a really broad range of interests in natural history. Once he was working in India, he expanded from those groups and did work and published on things like birds, mollusks, insects, even on arachnids. There is evidence that he had hopes to produce a volume on Indian arachnids. That work was never completed, unfortunately. He was assigned to the Yarkand expedition and given the remit to basically collect everything he could. He had an assistant to help with this, but it would have been exceptionally difficult, I think, with all those forced marches, and obviously they would have to collect and preserve as they were traveling. They would have to transport everything on the back of ponies, all those glass tubes, keeping things in spirit. The image on the right, I think, I'm still doing a bit of research on this, but I'm fairly certain that that's an unrecognised photograph of him that was taken by another member of the expedition whilst they were on the trip. Unfortunately for all of us, he died on the return journey. And this is where it starts getting a little bit more complicated for those of us who are interested in the spiders that he collected. The material was packaged up by Octavian Hume. He'd gone on the first expedition and sent out to various researchers to write it up. Pickard Cambridge was chosen to write up the spiders, which is how we come to have the link with Oxford. Stilitska's diary was reproduced and sent as a private copy to each of the people then that worked on the volumes. It was extremely difficult to find a copy of this. We don't have one in the archive in Oxford. And I was ever hopeful that once I'd tracked down a copy and scoured it, we would be able to get a great deal more information out of it. As OPC noted, though, that the notes on spiders are very few, which was a very nice way of saying that they are almost non-existent, unfortunately, in the notebook. So whilst we have been able to construct a very precise route now for Stilitska, now we know exactly where he was and when, it doesn't add a huge amount of information. Unfortunately, we can give some date ranges, and we're working on cross-referencing the localities, so we can be a bit more exact. Yuri will talk about this a bit later on. The material was sent to OPC pretty much in its exact field state. Since his description, though, it ended up being sort of lost in the main collection because the labelling was so poor. So we just had a few jars that could be identified by the word Yarkand. There's no data labels associated with the specimens. There's no identifications. Since I've been looking after this collection for the last 10 years, have occasionally had requests for material from this, and I've had to say to people that not being an arachnologist who can identify things to species level from this area of the world, I haven't been able to help them pick the material out. So I'm very lucky that Yuri's been able to take all of the material and work through it with a variety of co-authors. So that's the very brief introduction. Sorry if it was a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but I am now going to hand over to the expert who's going to talk about how we've broken this project down and identified the type materials from it.
Okay, Yuri, could you? Yeah.
Can you see me? Can you see my presentation?
Please make it for the whole screen as a presentation. It's.
Sorry, it looked like I made.
No, it's not yet.
What about now? Again, no.
It's still not like a presentation mode. Yeah.
I don't know how to do this.
There is a button at the top left of your screen bar, so you can find this sign which you need to press. Yes,
No, just
it's done. Okay.
Done. Okay. So I will continue presentation given by Zoya, and I also wish to send my greetings from tomorrow, because now I'm living in the December the 4th. As we have next day. Based on material collected during the Second Yarkand Mission, Cambridge reported 131 species, including 109 new species. Prior to our study, together with Zoya and other colleagues, correct type localities only of 20 species were listed correctly in the World Spider Catalog, and 85 species have either 85 new species have either incorrect or imprecise information about exact type localities. Why? Just it was because only 2 families have been revised just from this material. It was Salticida, Prushinsky, and Zuchovska. They looked for 9 species, and my work in '93, it was dealing with Tomizida and Sparacida. And Zoya already mentioned why it is nobody studied these spiders for more than 100 years, while it was first and pioneer work for this region. And nobody from the countries that expedition visited, nobody asking. So Zoya told that there are jars with labeled as Yarkand missions and vials, but in vials there are no any geographical or species label, just only some numbers of the bottle and of the vial. And just because of confusing title, Yarkand Mission and Yarkand belong to China, so many authors consider that species are described from China. And in World Spider Catalog, you can see for most of the species, Yarkand, China. Just even modern Indian arachnologists who made a survey of Indian Himalaya, they overlooked this paper, the first pioneer work, which mentioned and described so many species important for this region. Notice I'm showing all species described, and it highlighted the correctly listed species with type localities. And why there are so many mistakes? There are objective and subjective reasons. Stolichka passed away during the expedition, and material collected by him and partners. So just in this zoological part, he led the zoological part, Stolichka, but he was accompanied by several officers who helped to collect spiders and of course birds and mammals and reptiles. And so material collected by him was assembled by Alan Hume. And material was split into 5 geographical parts, not for each locality. And this is just bad thing on mostly for spiders, which were collected to alcohol. Some insects and mollusks, which were collected in dry conditions, so they were properly labeled and placed in small boxes. And among these 5 geographical parts, some of these parts are very large and not clear where the species was collected. Just it can be several hundred kilometers, one geographical part. Unfortunately, Cambridge mentioned collecting localities in his paper, and sometimes even exact localities, but type material has only labels indicating numbers on the bottle and number of the vial. So it is very difficult or impossible to recognize species without providing a revision. And only few species from this paper were illustrated by Cambridge. And also another difficulty that old maps and publication related to the missions became easily available only recently, thanks to PDF and just digitalizing literature. And just among these labels, there are several labels that refer to 2 or to 3 modern countries, like Muri Sindh Valley, so it's either Pakistan or India, or Yarkand Bursi, so it's China or India. Some labels like Sirikol to Panja and Bek, so it's Panj River. So it can be China, Afghanistan, or Tajikistan. Also, another difficulty is that there is several geographical names like Sirikol or Sirikul or Sarikol, or similar spelling, sometimes just in one word or sometimes two words. And so these names can refer to region, to mountain range, to stream, to settlements and lakes. So in Turkish language, kol, kul, so it means lake. And also this lake Sirikol or Zurkol, and there are some other derived names, have alternative names, just exactly Lake Sirikol, so Great Pamir Lake, and even Lake Victoria. So in different parts of the text, so you can find different names. And now I'm showing the locality of Sirikol Lake or Victoria Lake. So another make, showing three Sirikol or Sarikol. Again, three different localities. And subjective reasons for such misunderstanding type localities, because author of the arachnological works are not checking original publication and not trying to locate type, to see the type locality. At that time of expedition, there were no fixed boundaries in 19th century. And just no real names in the text or on the maps of the administrative units mentioned in the text. And boundaries were subject to change, and some are disputable even until now, just Jammu and Kashmir. Also, it was a problem that misspelling of the geographical names in Pickard Cambridge work. So just very often the same, for example, Rivier Panch, so he wrote in different way. And as I mentioned, so the same name was used in 19th century for many different localities, some geographical elements, mountain range, valley, lake, settlements, and other. And just as Zoya mentioned, the Stolichka notes are incomplete, merely being field notes, and information was lost when he passed away. And as I mentioned, there were several labels in the text. They refer to 2 or 3 countries. And so this is the main reason why this material not studied, because most spiders remain unstudied because it's not very easy. It's rather hard work. It's necessary to take all spiders and just to analyze size and just look description, verbal description. Unfortunately, so since the beginning of this project, together with colleagues from Russia, UK, Israel, Ukraine, I'm trying to revise most of the material, and several papers already published on Disderida, one species, Trachelide, Clubionide, just we described enigmatic genus Stolichka, which may belong to a new family related to Lycosidae. We revised just Lycosidae with Nadolny companion. Just now time just 1 of 9 species, but just the work on other species are in preparation. We revised almost all Gnaphosidae that available types are available, and Hieracanthidae. And several species-rich family are waiting for the revision. It's Agilenidae, Arachnidae 12 species, Liniphidae 4, Sparasidae 4, Pterididae 8, and several small families like Agilenidae, Idiopidae, Oxyopidae, Philodromidae, Tetragnotidae, and Ulovoridae. Types of several species of 3 Agroeca and single Dictina species were not found among Oxford collection. And in the end, it's worth to know that Rover mentioned in one of his papers dealing with Iran that he checked the type of Pardosa condolens. While it was not possible at that time, he was able to see the bottle with some leucocytes, but not spider itself. This is one photograph from the expedition with Ruzichka and Stolichka and his partner of expedition. And thank you for attention. Спасибо за внимание, and many other thanks on different languages. I finished.
Okay, Yuri.